Welcome to episode 71 of the Family Answer Man podcast. Today, we are discussing the frequency of emotional affairs from a biblical worldview on the Family Answer Man podcast. I'm your host, David Orges, and I'm here with Dr. Mark Crosby, pastor, educator, marriage and family therapist, and the resident expert here on the Family Answer Man podcast, where we tackle tough questions that families face and discuss practical solutions that really do work. So this podcast is not a therapy session, and we're not able to give specific advice to your situation, but we do believe that mental and spiritual health are very serious issues, and that family dynamics can be and often are very complicated. So for in-depth answers to your questions, we encourage you to seek professional counsel specific to your unique circumstances. If you would take a second right now to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell, you will never miss an episode of the Family Answer Man. And if you're listening via podcast, take a moment to follow, to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. It really does help us out. And if our content has helped you at all, please share the Family Answer Man with your family and your friends so they can join you on this journey of building stronger, healthier, happier families. Well, Dr. Mark, big topic, big question today on emotional affairs.
Yes.
And do you feel like that this is something that people have an understanding of what this is, or is this kind of misconstrued sometimes?
Yeah, I think everybody knows when they hear the term or the title, what is an emotional affair? Because from the time we were maybe in grade school, so to speak, we had a crush. On someone that maybe they didn't know it, or we were just, trying to get their attention, or maybe we didn't want to be seen as a couple, but we wanted to feel a connection with that person. Maybe we don't want to be teased by our friends. And so what we would do is we would, still be nice to a little girl or whatever. And that was grade school, middle school years. But as you get older, and what makes it extremely heartbreaking is that after you're married and the emotional affair occurs, or when you have a crush on someone other than your spouse. And maybe that happens at work, or that happens maybe in various other settings, sporting events where your kids are playing Little League soccer and you notice another person and they notice you and you're talking about the kids. And before you know it, you strike up this very deep feeling, an emotional conversation, so to speak. You start sharing, your intimate thoughts or what's going on maybe in your own marriage. And before you know it, something has occurred. Yeah. And so anyway, unfortunately, this happens more frequently than we want to admit. And the reason why we know it happens frequently is because we see it in the counseling setting, of course. We see it in church settings, of course, with pastors talking to their parishioners about this. We also, people admit it between themselves, among friends or whatever. I can't believe I'm falling for this guy. I can't believe I'm falling for this girl. I can't believe, I texted her, 40 times, in 3 days, kind of thing. Right. And so these are things that are happening. They don't make the quote unquote headlines, so to speak, like a full-blown, physical affair, if you will, but they're still there, and they're still very real, and they're still very devastating. And if we don't manage it, if we don't understand it, if we don't recognize what's going on, if we don't seek treatment for it, then it can and will lead, in about 75% of all cases, into something far more physical. And that, again, is something we need to be very, very mindful of. So, again, it's something that happens far frequently than we want to admit. And, again, it does lead to or evolve into other areas if we're not careful.
Yeah, 75% is a pretty high statistical rate for that turning into something more.
Yeah.
So that leads to our question for the day. And if you want to write in with a question, we would love to hear from you and hopefully answer that question. You can get in touch with us. You can email your questions to familyanswerman@liveoak.church. That's familyanswerman@liveoak.church. And again, we would love to answer your question. The question for today is this. It says, during a very heated argument, my husband told me he loves someone else. After things cooled down later that night, he told me that he was having an emotional affair with someone at work. I'm not sure how to process all this, So what can be done at this point?
Wow. So yeah, again, so this is how it happens, so to speak. Maybe someone at work, someone that you work closely with, you begin to discover they have some of the same interests, maybe some of the same political views, maybe even some of the same religious views, maybe some of the same, hobbies that you have. They like the same ball teams that you like, kind of thing. And before you know it, you're talking about sports and you're talking about, other interests. And then you start talking about your own children. Then maybe you bring up how things aren't going well in your marriage. And, I'm so sorry to hear that. And then you start talking about other areas of interest. And then before you know it, it goes outside the confines of work.
Right. Just an innocent friendship.
Yeah. Pretty soon you start, again, texting one another, or you start saying, hey, I'm just thinking of you today and hope things are getting better. And it comes across, in a very cordial, polite, and helpful sort of way. But then it gets a little further and a little deeper. And so before you know it, you find yourself having this emotional attachment to this person. And so basically an emotional affair is basically, as some would call, an affair of the heart, where you develop this intimate emotional connection and relationship with someone else other than your spouse. As I said earlier, some used to call it, in a more innocent time, a crush, as you once wanted this or declared this emotional attachment with someone else. But now, if you're married, it's a description where, again, you're thinking about this person now all the time. You desire to be around this person all the time. You spend time with this person, maybe at first in a very benign setting, such as work or sporting event, or maybe even church. And again, you start interacting with this person. You recognize you have common goals, interests, dreams, experiences, likes. You start liking that you like the same music, you like the same movies, you like the same shows, etc. And so what begins to happen is, after a time, you start communicating outside the walls of work or the sporting event or church, whatever it may be, generally through emails and text messages at first. Sometimes it's phone calls, and sometimes these calls can be very long in their time. Before you know it, you spent 2 hours talking to this person on your phone. The thing is that this starts taking out more and more of your personal and private time. You start also sharing more personal and private, more in-depth issues and interests. And then the reality is, when you go a few hours or maybe a day or two without seeing this person, you can't wait to see them again. You look forward to Monday morning, where everybody else is going, oh, it's Monday morning.
Right.
You can't wait to get there to work on Monday morning because she's there or he's there. And these are some things that we have to be mindful of. What else we should know is this. As you start sharing deeper feelings or personal feelings, you create ways of probably now meeting in now what's called innocent places. You start saying things like, well, maybe we can just meet for lunch, or why don't we meet for coffee first before the meeting? And so we can kind of discuss the meeting. And you find yourself, again, looking forward to that moment of having lunch or having coffee. You meet at social gatherings, the crawfish boil. You sit next to her. You sit next to him. At the tailgate, you bring their favorite dish because you know what their favorite dish is now because they've told you how I love chicken wings or whatever. You make sure you bring those. Or even, I hate to say it like this, but the church-wide picnic. You make sure that you're bringing, that particular meal or dessert to the church-wide picnic. And so you start thinking in terms of what do they want? What do they like? What can I do to find some sort of response or satisfaction from them? And so this is how things begin. And so what this means is this. When a person is involved in an emotional affair, what this means in many cases is that, first of all, we have poor boundaries or we can't say no. That person may be pursuing us. That person may be, finding us interesting, or we may be, finding them to be very helpful. And before we know it, we are caught up emotionally in who they are and what they offer us as far as filling our emotional needs, which means we're enjoying the pursuit. We're enjoying being pursued, and we're enjoying pursuing them. It's also a symptom that we've lost respect or even admiration for our own spouse.
Ooh, yeah.
And so what begins to happen is that somewhere in this, you've lost respect for your spouse. Maybe they work too much. Maybe they have not been kind in a long time. Maybe they have been very negligent of who you are and what you're wanting. They're focusing all their time on the kids or their job or their hobby. And now all of a sudden you start losing respect for them and you start losing admiration for them. But this person at work, this person, that's on your daughter's soccer team, they really are interested in who you are. They really do care about what you like. They really want to hear what you have to say. They really do find your job very interesting or whatever it may be. For some, this is a form also of revenge or a way of filling that connectional void they're missing with their spouse. So again, this is something that we have to be careful of. So that means that, again, something is often not going well at home. Some try to justify this. Some will try to say this is not cheating because there's no physical contact, at least not yet. And whenever you try to do that, you are now creating self-deception because this is, some will argue, in some cases, even worse because there is an emotional attachment that's occurring that's causing you to long for this person as opposed to just having been involved with a person.
So for those that say that a physical affair is one thing, but an emotional affair is not that big of a deal, that's just not true.
I would say it's a myth.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is you are creating in the emotional affair, you're creating an emotional attachment with someone else. An attachment, I will argue, is the cornerstone of any intimate relationship. And so what's happening is that they're creating this attachment that, again, is carrying over into work. And in some cases, if we're going to be honest, in some cases, you may be spending more time as far as being consciously aware time with this person than you are your own spouse. Meaning you're at work at 7 o'clock and so is this person.
Yeah.
And y'all are working till 5 or 6 o'clock that night.
And then if you're taking that home with you, that's a lot of emotional real estate and mental real estate.
Right. And then you get home and after, you said hey to the kids and had dinner with your wife or husband or whatever, and then all of a sudden this person is now texting you at 10 o'clock.
Right.
While your spouse is sleeping and you're texting till, midnight. So you have spent 6, 7, 8, 9 hours, 10 hours or so or more with this person. And that's day after day after day. So again, that creates this attachment that again begins to poison the marriage. For some, they're involved in the emotional affair as a need for outside validation. Again, maybe the spouse is feeling neglected or they're feeling a desire for more attention. And now this person shows up and this person starts complimenting you. This person starts telling you what a great job you're doing. This person, enjoys the same music that you enjoy, whatever it may be. And now there is this connection you're starting to feel. And you have this need for this outside validation, and this person is now meeting it because at home it's not being met. Also, a person may be struggling with how to express to their spouse what they need. They have a hard time telling their spouse, I need more of your time. I need more of your attention. I need to feel love from you. And if they have a hard time doing that, some find it easier just to get involved with someone at work who is pursuing them. So the thing is this, there are red flags.
Okay.
And we have to be mindful of these red flags. And if we're not mindful of these red flags, if we're not sure what to avoid, then we will find ourselves, if we're not careful, being caught up in something that could be devastating to our marriage, to our kids, to our future, to our reputation.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, for the pastors who are listening out there, you're in the crosshairs of this. Because for so many pastors, they are admired by their congregation. There are women in the pews that are saying, well, I wish my husband was the spiritual leader like obviously he is. I wish my husband was as sensitive to my needs as he's saying from the pulpit. I wish my husband would be a good of a praying person as the pastor or whatever it may be. And so what begins to happen is they start finding themselves, calling, coming by, texting, whatever, and they start having and creating this crush that, again, for a lot of pastors, they find very interesting and very flattering. And if things aren't going well between them and their wife, before you know it, you have a recipe for disaster.
Right.
And I know we don't like to talk in those terms, but there's not a week that doesn't go by in my world where I don't hear of a pastor, a missionary, an evangelist, a staff person at a church that does not experience this on some level.
Right. Yeah.
And so to pretend like it doesn't exist does not do ourselves or our churches or our pastors, any good at all. So again, we need to be mindful of this. And so for the pastors who are listening, please be careful. These things can happen overnight.
So you mentioned some red flags.
Yeah. So here's some red flags we need to be mindful of. The first, and again, let me just say this before I go into the red flags. Again, I want to be very cautious and careful in saying there's nothing wrong with being helpful. There's nothing wrong with caring.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being prayerful. But there are lines that we must be aware of.
Okay.
So again, I don't want to give the wrong impression. Yes, be caring, be conscientious, be supportive where you can, be encouraging where you can, be prayerful where you can, but know what the red flags are. And here are the red flags. Number one, when we start feeling like we must be in daily contact with that person. When you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about her, or you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about him. Or you go to bed at night and you're thinking, I wonder what they're doing, or I wonder how they're feeling, or I wonder what's going on with them. Or it's on the weekends and you start texting, at midnight, or you get a text from him or her saying, good morning, just thinking about you, or I hope you have a great day. And again, that sounds very innocent, but the reality is that is starting to, again, become a red flag, because you're now getting into an arena of life, you're getting into an arena of a relationship whereby you're starting to cross several lines, or you're Facebook connecting, throughout the day, or you feel like as you receive these texts, early in the morning, late at night, that you need to be secretive.
That's a big one.
So when you feel like, oh my goodness, if my husband sees this, oh my goodness, my wife sees this, there's going to be a problem, then that's a red flag.
And especially, nowadays there are lots of apps and different means of communication that disappear. And so it's easy to, if you feel like you have to use something like that to cover your tracks. Right. Yep, absolutely.
So when you feel yourself, I feel like I have to be deceptive, secret, or as you say, cover my tracks, just note that as a red flag. Let that warning bell, again, signal to you you're going way too far in this. Next, if we feel like we're missing them, or we're longing to see them, or we're sad when we don't hear from them. If, it's Saturday afternoon and you're going, I haven't heard from her. Usually she texts me by now, or usually he texts me by now. And you're sad because you hadn't heard, and people say, what's wrong? And I don't know, I don't want to say, it's nothing, it's no big deal. But what's making you sad is you haven't heard from her, or you haven't heard from him since, you left work Friday. That's a red flag. Or when you become gleeful when they do contact you, when you see that text message and your heart starts pounding, and you start getting giddy or excited about the fact they sent you a text or they sent you an email, that's a red flag. Also, if you're keeping count, thirdly, when you start confiding personal things into their life that's reserved only for those that you're to be closest to. So when you start sharing your secrets or sharing your accomplishments, you can't wait to tell her, you can't wait to tell them, that, hey, this happened, or we got the sale, or this, my kid, won, student of the year, or whatever it may be. You can't wait to say that, not to your parents or to your spouse or to the people you're close to, but you can't wait to say it to that person. Yeah. That person at work. When you lie or keep secrets about this person from your spouse, when your spouse says, who was it that texted you? Who was it that called you? Who is this person that I'm reading their email and they're telling you how wonderful you are and they can't wait to see you Monday morning? Who is this person? And you have to lie, you have to be secretive. That's a serious red flag. By the way, we should never have secrets from our spouse. Yeah. That is a ongoing, I would argue, marital principle. You do not keep secrets from your spouse. Mm-hmm. Next, when you start comparing this person to your spouse, when you start saying to yourself or to your friends or to others that this person you have an emotional affair with, they understand me better than my spouse. They have more in common with me than my spouse. They love the same kind of music. They love the same kind of movies. We support the same, football team or whatever. They really, are closer to me right now than my spouse. That's a serious red flag.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I've heard people say that. Unfortunately, I've heard people, admit that. They like the same things I like. They like to go to the same places I like to go to. Not only that, but when you start denying what's going on, we're just friends. We're just friends. No, there's an emotional affair here. When the deception grows, when you have to now cover your tracks more, as you said, as you become more secretive, as you I have to leave the room now and catch this call, when the deception grows, when your disappointment in your spouse grows, these are all red flags that, again, if you're not careful, is leading to, again, this emotional affair. So one of the great questions is, so what do we do? What do we do when this happens? And there's 7 or 8 things I want us to kind of keep track of. Number one, you have to recognize this is a form of infidelity. No matter how you want to candy coat it, no matter how you want to pass it off as we're just friends,
Right.
This is a form of infidelity. And you need to be honest with yourself, honest with the other person, honest with your spouse, honest with God, honest with everyone involved. This is a form of infidelity. It's perhaps fair to say, okay, maybe there has not been a physical affair, but this is infidelity, as we said a moment ago, nonetheless. And so again, and as we said before, some will argue it's even worse. Secondly, it erodes the foundation of marriage. These types of affairs have the capability of eroding the foundation of your marriage. In other words, foundationally, our marriage is about attachment. And if you spend all of your time, all of your energy, all of your free time focusing on someone else, connecting with someone else, forming an attachment with someone else, you're not doing that with your spouse. And the more time, energy, effort that you give to this other person and not to your spouse, you're detaching from one and you're attaching to the other. Jesus put it very simply. He says, you cannot love two.
Right.
You cannot serve two. For you will love one and you'll hate the other.
Yeah.
You cannot serve two masters, for you will love one and you'll hate the other. And this is a prime example. And this is why so many people wind up in this emotional affair, treating their spouse with all sorts of contempt and criticism
harsh,
and very harsh, because they are, again, focusing all their energy, all their love for this person they're having the emotional affair with. Next, as this begins to happen, as you begin to recognize what's going on, one of the things you may need to do is you've got to hit the pause button and grieve what's going on here. In other words, when it is discovered, and it will be, when this is discovered, there is a grieving process because you're grieving over 2 main things. Number one, you're grieving over the fact that you have let down your spouse, and you're grieving over the fact that you have gone into an arena that has caused pain and problem, not just for you, not just for your spouse, but perhaps for this other person and perhaps for their family as well.
Yeah.
As we've said before, this creates collateral damage all the way around. And in some cases, therefore, you're going to have to jumpstart your marital relationship. And so that takes a lot of time, energy, effort. Trust has been lost. So next, be honest and be open and bring everything into light. Whenever there is infidelity, whenever there is an affair, you've got to bring it out of the darkness into the light.
Right, all of it.
All of it. Otherwise, it never gets cured, it never gets better, it never gets healed, ever how you want to put it. But you've got to bring it into the light, everything. Often this requires a therapist. And again, as we said time and time again, there is no shame in seeing a therapist. A therapist, if nothing else, will give you a place, a forum, a platform, if you will, where you can be open and honest with one another, with the guidance, with the help, with the structure of a third party, namely the therapist. The next thing is very difficult for a lot of people, and that is it must end. There is no, hey, can we kind of sort of stay in touch?
Right. Doesn't work.
Well, what if I still work with her? Talk to your boss. Find another place to work, another level of the company, another part of town, work from home, whatever it may be. But again, the affair has got to end, and there can be a no contact policy.
Yeah.
And again, be open, give complete access to all areas of your life. Your spouse, if you have the emotional affair, needs to have access to your cell phone. They should anyway, I would argue.
Right.
To your social media page, to your computer, to everything about you. There should be open access to all areas. No more secret passcodes or passwords. All open, all access. Seek God's grace, seek God's wisdom, and seek God's forgiveness in all this. This may be a great time for you to maybe share this with your pastor. Maybe a great time maybe to have people pray over you. Again, people that you know and trust. Some may not know all the details. This may be a great time, though, for people just to kind of get in your life and maybe get into the lives of others that are older, wiser, and just have them pray over you, pray with you, mentor you, so to speak. But seek God's grace, seek God's wisdom, seek God's forgiveness. Do not keep God out of this. This was a temptation that came to you. And as it comes to a lot of people, you therefore need the Spirit of God, the grace of God, the Word of God, the people of God in your life. Also, create guardrails. As we've said before, guardrails are those things that you agree with your spouse that says, I am not going to text another person of the opposite gender. I'm not going to go have coffee with someone of the opposite gender. I'm not going to have lunch with someone of the opposite gender because I'm married.
Right.
And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go cross town to a meeting, in the same car with someone of the opposite gender. In other words, these are guardrails that you create with your spouse. And we've talked about this before, but you create these guardrails so you don't find yourself in a predicament.
Right. Yeah, well, guardrails are more than it goes beyond. Hey, this is a sin, and I've crossed, and
right.
I've gone off the cliff. And you've used this example a lot.
Right.
Guardrails are meant to prevent you from going over the edge
right.
before you actually get to the edge.
Right, exactly. The guardrail says the edge is here. On the other side of this edge is disaster.
Right.
So again, create guardrails, and sometimes you have to be proactive. Sometimes you and your spouse just need to spend some time saying, okay, what are our guardrails? Seek to begin again. Say, you know what? This was not healthy. This was a close call, but let's begin again. Let's get the help we need. Let's get the therapy we need. Let's begin again. Also, here's something that we don't talk about very much, but again, if you've tuned out, please tune back in. Stay away from those who cheat. If you work with someone who is known to cheat on their spouse, if you have someone at your hunting camp that's known to cheat on their spouse, if you have women, in your book club that has known to cheat on their spouse, stay away from those who cheat. The bottom line is this: emotional affairs are common, more common than we realize. They require treatment. This can be devastating in some cases as an actual physical affair. But things can get better if it's brought into the light. And so again, to pretend like this didn't happen, to deceive yourself, to deceive your spouse, to deceive those around you is not the way to go. To keep this in the darkness is not the way to go. Bring it into the light. And when the light comes in, darkness has to flee. Bring this to the grace of God. Let God's grace, God's mercy, and God's love pour over you so that you can truly begin again.
Well, there you have it from the Family Answer Man. I hope that this episode has helped to shed some light on what the dangers are of emotional affairs. We do hope that, as always, because this is not a therapy session, that you would seek professional counsel and help for your specific circumstances. But we do hope that this episode of the Family Answer Man will help you make changes that lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family.